Thank you for joining me in the garden today. I'm Liz Davey, and you're watching A Walk in the Garden on NCTV. I'm here in my herb garden, and suddenly it's winter. We didn't get a frost until early November, a killing frost, but then, my goodness, it came in fast. And now we are having some record low temperatures, or record low high temperatures is more like it. So it's really chilly, and winter has come. So if you didn't get your fall preparations done, there may be still a few days to do them, but it is coming, and soon we'll probably have a little white covering on the ground. I'm in the herb garden, and I have not cleaned up much purposely. I leave the oak leaves on it. This is an area that gets lots of oak leaves, and oak leaves tend not to mat down the way maple leaves do, so they make a very good mulch on this garden. Also, it will let beneficial insects overwinter, and we will be able to clean it off in the spring. We can still pick a few herbs, most definitely the sage, which Thanksgiving is coming up in another week, so we want some sage for our turkey stuffing, and maybe a little thyme too, and there's several thyme plants in the garden. Here's a good one right here, and we'll pick some of the thyme and some of the sage. So those are the ones we can use. The chives are pretty much gone. They've gotten really limp, and they will be gone. We might still be able to pick a few and use them right away, but they wouldn't last very long bringing them into the house. Today they're quite frozen, I think. So the herb garden is pretty much put to bed. You'll notice that all of my little herb signs are gone, and all the decorative items that I had, including my old-fashioned timepiece that generally sits on there, the sundial, and I put that away for the winter. So it's ready to go, and we can still collect some seeds from this fennel. That would be about the only thing you can do right now, or collect a few seeds. So let's move over to the perennial garden. That too has been winterized. The one thing you do have to continue to do throughout the winter is spray any broadleaf evergreens that the deer might like. So I'm deer spraying this this is a PJM rhododendron, which is all budded up for spring, but the deer do like it. The other thing the deer happen to like are grape hyacinths, and they will eat those unless I keep them sprayed. It usually doesn't make any difference to the bloom, but I think it helps if they can keep their greenery a little bit longer. I'm going to move down the way. I've left many of the perennials standing. I will be removing, if I haven't done so already, all of the plant supports, and I'll store these for the winter. It makes it easier to cut things down in the spring. I've cut down a few of the perennials, mainly the iris and the Siberian iris and daylilies. Those are foliages that tend to get kind of sticky and messy in the spring, so those have been cut down. The other things I've left standing, I could collect seeds from this eupatorium. It's still going to seed. Also, the aster also has seeds that could still be collected. If there's a nice day that I want to come out and collect a few seeds more, I've already got a pretty good collection inside. But taking out these things and storing them, I put a little marsh hay over some tenderer plants, eupatorium. I may add a little to some foxgloves foliage too. Pull it up over these foxgloves that are right here. And this will just kind of keep it frozen. Mulch in the winter is more to keep it frozen and keep it from thawing on the warm days that come along than to keep it warm. It also protects it from the wind a little bit. So I will mulch a few tender things if I have the opportunity to do so. Again, the asters will leave the stems and the base of the asters provide a home to some of the bumblebees and other creatures in the insect world that live in the garden. There are a few plants that need a little more protection, and I'm going to set these down. And that would be some of the lavenders and chrysanthemums. And how I protect the lavender is to fill a basket, a bushel basket, with oak leaves. And I'll put that right over the top of the lavender and kind of fold in the stems, and then put a rock on top. I do this to all my lavenders and also to the chrysanthemums that I have a few that tend to be perennial as long as I protect them. Roses are another thing. Don't prune your roses in the fall. Hopefully you haven't done it already. But you do need to protect the base. And I'll add compost just in a little pile of compost around the base of each of my roses. And then in the spring, about the time they start to leaf out, is the time to do the pruning. And we'll do that then. Hydrangeas, I leave standing until spring, and those will be cut down at that time. It's time to do some cutting of some of the things that are in the garden for fall decoration, fall and winter decorations. And these sedums, with their leaves stripped off, can be added to evergreen decorations. You can even spray them if you prefer, if you want a darker red color, or even gold or silver. You can spray these, and then you will have some stems to put in with your evergreens. As they dry, they stay pretty well in the garden. The other thing to be picked is red twig dogwood. This actually profits from being pruned back, so it's good to prune it back in order to use the stems, and then it will put up new ones. The younger foliage is redder, so we could use these in some of the fall planters and add a little color too. Again, this side of the garden, you'll see my baskets with rocks. It's not very beautiful, but it does do the job and protects the plants over the winter. The baskets can be found usually at flea markets and yard sales and collected over the summer or fall and even the spring, and then used over the garden. This one I think was a waste basket, and the others are just bushel baskets. Now let's move on to the vegetable garden. Not much left in the vegetable garden. However, there still are a few things, and mainly it's parsley. And I've covered the parsley with some of the marsh hay, as well as the strawberries. They've been covered with marsh hay too. But the parsley can still be picked a little while longer, and then eventually it too will freeze and be gone. I've also left my lovage plant, which has a plant support over it. And of course the rhubarb and the blueberries are mulched with straw. The rest of the garden has been rototilled, and it will stay that way until it's time to do some spring planting, probably a little burning of my brush pile, which is collecting. Before then, burning starts, I think, the end of January, but we usually don't get out and get it done at least until February. The other thing that is here is the garlic, and it's nicely put to bed. Some of it was starting to come up a little bit, but it's been mulched with straw. I left the strings on as just kind of a guide as to where it is. And that too will come up in the spring. I have a little extra marsh hay, which I've tied up. Can use that in the spring to mulch our early spring crops. Birdhouses have been cleaned out. There's a birdhouse back here, and I pulled the bottom out of the bluebird house. I want to get the bottom back in early, but I didn't want a mouse to make a nest in it over the winter, so the bottom gets pulled out of that one. It's to rather easy to do. Some of the other birdhouses have been brought into the shed or the garage to be put out again early next spring. All the dahlias were killed back by the frost. The top foliage was cut off, and the dahlias and the canna lilies, there were some canna lilies in here as well, were all put into the house on a bed of peat moss, which I happen to have. You could also use newspaper, paper shreds, anything just kind of as a bed for that. And they're being stored now in an unused room in my house, which is kept quite cool. It would be ideal to put them in an unheated cellar that just kind of stays around 40 to 50 degrees. But I don't have a cellar with that type of temperature control, so the back bedroom has worked about as well as anything. And those bulbs won't be planted again until the weather warms up dependably and there's no more frost in the soil. Now let's move back to the backyard. The backyard garden also has some leaves that have been left on the flower beds, but I have cleared out some of the paths somewhat. The lawn in back, we have, in fact, all the lawns have been mulched except for the areas that were covered with pine needles. And you probably noticed those around the vegetable garden and on various paths around the property. We use everything in one way or another. We either compost it or use the pine needles on paths or shred the leaves right back into the lawn to provide a fertilizer for the lawn. Back here, I've pulled out some of the hosta. There's still a few left, and it can either be cut or pulled. I think this one needs to be cut. Other things can be cut back in the spring. The hellebores require literally nothing, and they stay green all winter. So it's kind of nice to come out and find something green, at least when there isn't a snow cover. And the hellebores will bloom very early in the spring, and they require very little care. The other thing that you can cut for decorations is leucothwaite, and this is a plant that will bloom a bit in the spring, but it stays evergreen all winter, and it's very nice in outdoor arrangements or even indoor arrangements throughout the winter when you need a little something green to put in with an arrangement. I've been collecting seeds from the turtle heads, and I will have some packets of those to share at the seed library at the Norfolk Public Library. This is a pink one. I've collected the seeds from the native one. Now moving back towards the pond. Our heron that's been protecting the pond all season is now going to find a home inside my shed for the winter. The real herons, not the fake ones, but the real ones have departed for the winter for sunnier climes. They prefer a place that they can fish. And right now we have a skim of ice on the pond. I've got my pond heater in, which is keeping a hole in the ice to vent all of the gases that are produced by the fish. They are living creatures, and they do, as well as the dead leaves that are on the bottom of the pond, they will produce some gases throughout the winter. If you leave those in the pond, they will kill the fish. So we want to make sure we have some sort of a hole in the ice. A lot of times there's a hole around the edge. Right now the ice is mostly in the middle, but this pond heater is on a thermostat, and when the pond is frozen, it will keep a hole in it to exhaust any gases that form. Let's put the heron away. My shed, thanks to a glass wall, gets really cold at night. No keeping of plants in here. It was down to about 15 degrees last night, but if I look at the thermometer this morning, it's up to 90 degrees with the door shut. So it has wide fluctuation of temperatures. Makes a nice place to work on various projects when the sun is out, but if there's no sun, it stays about as cold as outdoors. Again, the pond is set for the winter. I will need to shovel it to keep the little heater clear of snow if we get a great deal of snow. I've put away all of the other equipment, the waterfall, the skimmer, and all the tubing that connects the two, and also the aerators. Some people leave an aerator in and have that keep the hole in the ice, but I didn't feel it was too dependable in this climate if we get really, really cold weather. So I prefer to use this small heating unit, which is plugged in where the pump was plugged in before. Again, collecting some seeds, but by and large, we have some things that stay green. I like that, to have a little look of green in the winter. The carex grass will stay green, as well as, of course, the rhododendrons. And again, we need to be sure to come out with the deer spray. The deer will sometimes eat the rhododendrons and the other plants. It just depends how hungry they are. Most of the time they don't bother them. And they don't bother the leucothoe either, and a number of other plants. But holly they will eat. And I have several hollies that I cut for decorations, and I would like to have the decorations and not have the deer completely eat the hollies down to the ground. So I will spray those with the deer spray also. Now let's head towards the house, if not, and then eventually in the house to prepare some Thanksgiving goodies. On the patio, most of the patio furniture has been stored away for the winter, except the larger items that we really can't fit in. It's time to feed the birds. I keep my feeders filled with sunflower seed and mixed seed, and the birds have been really hungry the last few days. I even have a brave little chickadee flying down right behind me. They are the probably friendliest little birds. They're not really frightened of anything. We've had cardinals, blue jays, finches, a variety of birds, woodpeckers of several varieties. It's fun to watch them from inside. And you do need to keep your feeders full because they come to depend on the food that's sourced. I've added suet to this one in the cold weather particularly. They appreciate having a little extra fat. It's hard to be a bird and be outside all the time, and they require quite a few calories to fly around. And they can find some feed still with berries and seeds that are on the plants, but they do like the supplemental feeding too. I've cleared the flower beds back here, put the furniture away, and we're ready for winter to begin. So let's go inside and see what we can cook up for Thanksgiving. The house plants have been brought inside, and the cuttings too. These are the cuttings that we took in September and October outdoors and let them root. Pretty much all of them rooted. There were a few that have not, and I'll go through, and any that have not rooted, I do pull out. The next step with these is keeping them well watered, and I also put them under plant lights for the winter. But soon they will have to leave the plant lights and just go into a sunny area because I need to divide them. Almost all of these pots contain 3 cuttings. And I'm also taking off any dead leaves, cutting them off. There will often be a few that are under. But most of these have 3 cuttings in each one, and they will need to be put into individual pots. So we'll turn out to have quite a few more than will fit under my lights. And some of those will have to go in another spot. I don't fertilize them in the winter. I will start to fertilize them very lightly in the spring. If you fertilize them now under the lights, they would become huge. And I really don't have time to have them be huge or space. And they can't be put out until about the end of next May. So they need to stay as small as they can. But I will pinch them from time to time in the middle so that they become bushy little plants. And keep them at a reasonable size by pinching them down, and then they should be bushy, nice plants ready to set out in the garden next May. Most of these are frost sensitive, so you don't want to put them out until there's no frost. I get to have a very large area of plants by the time spring comes, if all goes well. Most of my house plants have been brought inside. Nearly all of them spent the summer outside, and now it's just a matter of caring for them. And I have some leaves that need to be cut. Anytime the leaves yellow, I'll cut them off. This is a cardamom plant. I have never had cardamom pods, but it's a nice foliage plant anyway, even if I don't get a crop of cardamom from it, which would be very nice, but I don't think after this many years of having the plant it's going to happen. But we cut off leaves as needed to keep the plant somewhat attractive and growing in the house. If needed, and if there are insects, I use a neem oil spray, and I just give them a spritz of that periodically. This is helpful if you have mealybug or any of the other things that can attack houseplants, even little flies. And most of my plants will get a spritz of this every couple of weeks, maybe once a month, in order to continue growing. So houseplants are pretty much the gardening from this season forward. We can go outside and check things out, as we have been doing, but inside is where most of the action is as far as growing things. In another couple months, it'll be time to do some seeding. So we'll have plenty of things to do inside as far as inside gardening goes. Now let's go into the kitchen and prepare a few things to add to the Thanksgiving menu. Today I'm going to make 2 desserts and 2 appetizers. Turkey is usually the main dish on Thanksgiving, but the sides are where you can be a little more original and innovative. So we're going to do a couple things that are perhaps a little different. The first thing I'm going to make are some cranberry squares. Of course, you'll probably want pumpkin pie, maybe apple pie, pecan pie, but for people who aren't really pie lovers, these are a nice different addition, and they're almost like a brownie. We started out by melting a half a cup of butter, and to that I'm going to add a half a cup of regular white sugar, or I'm sorry, a cup, 1 cup of sugar to a half cup of butter melted, and 1 cup of packed brown sugar. Butter's still a little warm, so we're going to just stir that in until everything's nice and mixed. These are pretty easy, and they're almost like a cranberry nut brownie. And we'll add 2 eggs. Again, blend those in well. And then we want to add 2 cups of flour. And I'm going to add vanilla, and this vanilla is a vanilla bean paste, which is kind of nice. It has pieces of vanilla bean in it. And I want to add 2 teaspoons of that. And then the dry ingredients, the leavening and salt, and that would be 2 teaspoons of baking powder and a half teaspoon of salt and a heaping half teaspoon of cinnamon. And we're going to stir that around, and the mixture will become quite thick. Now I'll stir in 1 cup of fresh or frozen chopped cranberries. And I just put these through my food processor. And these through my nut grinder or food processor would work as well. Get rid of some of these items. And we'll stir that in well, and again, the mixture is fairly thick. And then I want to scrape this into a 13 by 9 inch greased pan. And this gets spread out so it forms an even layer in the pan. And this goes into the oven at 350 degrees for about half an hour. I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes. And the next thing I'm going to do is over on this side, and it's going to be an hors d'oeuvre. And these again use cranberries. Cranberries and pumpkin are kind of things of the season, so we're going to use some of those. And I've started out with a package of crescent rolls. You can also make your own dough, but this is an easy appetizer, so using the crescent rolls is easier. I put the pieces together and rolled it out so that there were no holes in the pieces. And then I'm going to push each one into a mini muffin pan. To make a little cup. This will make 2 dozen. I'm just doing 1 at this time. And some of these are a little larger than others. That's all right. It's nice if you can cut it a little more square than I did. But they'll still be tasty, I'm pretty sure. And to each of these little cups, I'm going to add a square of brie cheese. Just a small one. And then a spoonful of whole berry cranberry sauce. Getting some of the berries in each one too. I've sprayed the pan with cooking spray prior to putting the dough in, so hopefully they will come out easily. And we'll add a sprig of fresh rosemary. If you don't have rosemary, I think they'll probably be just as good without it, but I did bring my rosemary plant inside. for the winter, and I can still cut sprigs off of it. I haven't had great luck raising rosemary inside in the winter, so we might as well use it and enjoy some of it. You don't want a whole lot, just a tiny sprig. Otherwise, I think it would be a little strongly flavored. It also thins the rosemary so that it will form new shoots, and you'll have more shoots to pick later on. But we're going to put those in a 375-degree oven for about 15 minutes. And I'm going to set the timer a little short on this because I'm not sure how long it's going to take. We'll set it at 12 and check it at that time. Now let's move on to another appetizer, and this one takes a little more time. And what I've done, various years I've used this cornucopia basket for a variety of things. Flowers for one, and then I've also used it for fruit, and today I'm going to use it for some vegetables. I'm going to make a vegetable arrangement for an hors d'oeuvre. And I'm going to start out with parsley. Actually, the first thing I did was to wash it well with hot water and some detergent and then let it dry. That had to be done ahead of time. And now, with the remains of the parsley from the garden, I'm going to use greening pins. And these, again, are for floral arranging, but I did scald them. And I want to make a nice fluff of parsley around the edges of this. And I'm going to cut some of the stems and use the greening pins to fasten it around the edges. So we have a nice base for our vegetable arrangement. The parsley, of course, was left in the garden, and that will come up for a spring crop. We can continue to use it as long as possible from the garden until it absolutely freezes. You could also use kale or lettuce or other greens. They have to be rather sturdy greens. Just a very tender lettuce would probably not be real effective. And this is a somewhat last-minute item, although you could probably refrigerate it for a couple hours without any problem. And we need a couple more bunches. I've used just the floral foam in the middle, and this is the foam that is dry. It's called Sahara, and it's for dry arrangements rather than wet ones. The wet ones is called Oasis, which makes some sort of sense if you're on the desert. And now we'll clean these bits up and add to it. And I'm going to add not only vegetables, but also some meat and cheese. And my attempt is to make some flowers out of some of this meat and cheese using some radishes, and some cornichons, which are nice little French pickles. And I'm going to add some of these, and these are a little difficult to make, but get them right in there. And I put a cornichon in the middle of this cheese. Probably put some in the salami as well. And what I'm going to do is just roll it up in an attempt to make a little flower out of it. Put a toothpick through it to hold it in place. And then we can just add it around the edges of this arrangement. And again, some more of the cheese. The cheese seems to be better cut in half. You can make almost a little calla lily out of it. Squeeze it a bit at the bottom and maybe put one of the small cornichons in the middle. Let's put it right side up. And again, using a toothpick, add it to this arrangement. And I would continue adding some of these. The ham, I think, is better cut in strips. Let me replace the one I've got in there. And then just rolled. You start with a tight roll in the middle. And then roll outward as if you were making a flower. Perhaps pleat it a little as you go, a little looser. You can also put things like this on a vegetable tray. And let's put this one up here. And just roll another one, roll this one around an olive. Give it a little center. Again, stick it in there, and I want to make sure our foam stays in place. Now I'll add some other things to this. Vegetables and radish roses are one of the things you can add. A radish rose is pretty simple to make. If you have the radish, you cut just a little X in the middle, little wedges out, and then you just use your paring knife to make petals down the edge. And we can use the toothpicks to add these into the design. And I also have some little carrot flowers. These are just slices of carrot with a little piece of dark olive in the middle. And again, we can add those in. More radish roses. Once you've made them, putting them into ice water helps the petals curl back. And I have some celery fans, just pieces of celery that have been cut so that they fan out a bit, to add as well. Another carrot flower. And then you can just poke in pieces of carrot here and there, if you wish. More radish roses. These are the last of the radishes from the garden that were picked about a week ago. They were the late crop that I put in. Placing some of these too close together. Move that one up and put some more of this in. If you make extra, you can refresh it. We can also add some of these little cornichon pickles. Good with the cold cuts. you have a bigger basket, you can add more things. And you can also have extras to refill it as it goes. I've also made some carrot curls. Again, using a larger carrot, just use the peeler and then put them in cold water. Help them curl a little, but putting them in cold water will encourage them to form a curl. And I'm just going to set some of those in as well. Let's see, we got a spot up here. The idea is just to fill it with items. And we'll put another carrot curl there. Another way to do a radish is simply to cut it in sections, little sections not quite to the bottom, and that makes a little radish flower. It's really not hard, and it's fun to try out some of these things and work on just having a little fun with your hors d'oeuvres. Another couple of the pickles. You can also do a wreath this way. I've done wreaths for Christmas a number of times, and they're very attractive. A few more carrots here and there. And there is our cornucopia, hors d'oeuvre. And we need something to go with it, like a dip. And the easiest dip out there is a package of salad dressing mix, and I'm using half, and you would use a whole package to a pint of sour cream, and this is a half pint of sour cream, so I'll just use half the package, or as much as you wish, and then just stir it in. And this makes a great dip for the vegetables. Now, we're about ready to check this, and these look done to me at 12 minutes instead of 15. And then we'll put them onto a tray for serving. And I think we can just take them out by their corners. That one will probably fit up there better. Quick and easy. If you have the ingredients in your refrigerator, this is something you can put together pretty quickly for last minute arrivals, people that drop in if you want to serve a little hot hors d'oeuvre. Right now these are hot. We'll put those out too. The next thing I want to make is another dessert, and this is a pumpkin cheesecake parfait, and this is an unbaked dessert. And I'm going to read you the recipe for the full recipe, but I'm only going to make half, so if it looks like I'm not using enough, that's why. And I'm going to start out with move these a bit. 8 ounces of cream cheese, and I'm going to mix that a little with the mixer. A half cup of sugar, and spin that a little bit. And then I'll add 2 teaspoons of vanilla, actually. I'm sorry, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and again, I'm using the vanilla bean paste. And 1 cup of pumpkin. This is just canned pumpkin. And I'm going to mix that well. And oh, we have to add our pumpkin pie spice, which is, it'll be 2 teaspoons. I'm adding 1 teaspoon because it's a half recipe, using my half teaspoon measure. And I'm going to mix this well. I'm going to stop and scrape down my bowl a little bit. Then I've put some heavy cream. You could use a large tub, 12-ounce tub of Cool Whip, but I'm going to add some of the cream to this mixture and just fold it in. This makes kind of a pumpkin mousse mixture. Until we don't see any more white. And now it's time to fill my little glasses, and I'm using some antique glasses I have. I believe they are water glasses. And I have made crumbs from some Biscoff cookies, and these are, you can purchase, or you can make a recipe for speculoos, which would be about the same thing. And I just use a rolling pin and a plastic bag to crush the cookies. And I'm going to put some in each of the cups. Probably should have used a bigger spoon, but I'll fold the bag back so it will stay open. And add some of the crumbs to the bottom of each cup. About 2 teaspoons, I think. And get rid of some of these pieces. And then I'm going to start layering my pumpkin mixture. If you're being very exact, you could use a piping tube to pipe it in, but a spoon works too and is a bit faster. And then we'll layer it with the cream. And how many you get depends really on the size of your containers. These are fairly small. And then more pumpkin. Add a little more to each one. With a glass of this size, you would get about 8. And I whipped 3/4 of a cup of cream. Should be just about right to put a little more on top of each one. actually. And I'll finish them off with adding just a touch more of the cookie crumbs. Something quite easy for Thanksgiving or any time. I think our cake is ready to come out of the oven. However, I have some that I previously baked all set. Okay, today we made 2 hors d'oeuvres, the cranberry and brie tarts and an hors d'oeuvre cornucopia to be served with a dressing and sour cream dip. I've put out some crackers with that. We also made cranberry squares. After they came out of the oven and cooled, I added confectioner's sugar sprinkled over the top. A sifter works really well to do that, or if you have a strainer, you can put the confectioner's sugar in a strainer and shake it over the top of your cookie bars. The other thing we made are pumpkin parfaits with spiced pumpkin mixture and almost a mousse, like pumpkin mousse with whipped cream, and Biscoff cookies. I wanted to point out also the Indian corn that I grew. Behind my garden, I have a little space that I sometimes grow some sort of decorative corn. I gave up on sweet corn because the raccoons ate it, but they don't seem to eat Indian corn. So we got some mini Indian corn this year, and I'm using that as just a little decoration for the Thanksgiving season. I want to thank you for joining me for this program and say that I'm very thankful to the NCTV crew who's been religiously filming this show for 99 episodes. This is number 99, and I appreciate them, and I'm very thankful for them that they will come to my house and put up with all of my mistakes and all of my gardening and cooking to bring this show to you on NCTV. Thank you.